What if Xanatos killed Master Yoda?
Headquarters has been breached and casualties are severe.
Keep your wits, Captain. What do we know of the enemy?
Target is carving a bloody path in this direction. Unconfirmed reports suggest it's Sith. You're about to find out what we're made of.
You're made of bones that break and blood that spills.
Calling me. The Force is dark. It become one with the Force. I am Master Qui-Gon.
What would happen if the fallen Padawan to Qui-Gon Jinn gave up on bombing the Jedi Temple? What if instead he fully committed himself to killing the Grandmaster? And what now? Having no precise date for their first meeting, one obvious suggestion could be made and placed around the time that Xanatos was found by Master Qui-Gon, a student who, even as a young boy, was defined and depressed by his own problems. Skipping past the death of his sister and father and his fall to the dark side, we will not be debating the source of the blame, but instead the actions that would come about later on in George's original timeline. Enraged from his failed attempts to strike down his former master on Bandamir, the hate he felt gave him more power. I should also explain the captive temple fully implies that he could have killed Master Yoda, but chose instead to gloat like a villain. However, if we remove this desire to mentally crush his foe and have him only do that which he deemed necessary, everything would change, leading to the first massive change in our timeline: the death of Master Yoda. Continuing to gawk and glare from the shadows while refusing to reveal his true dark side presence, this lack of preparation would prove fatal, allowing the Grandmaster to get close enough towards the bomb that Xanatos had already planted. And for those among us who would consider this outcome unrealistic, this wouldn't even be the first Grandmaster killed by simple explosions. Jedi Master Zim, a Grand Master of the Order, was taken out by wrist rockets.
Watch those wrist rockets!
If we imply that Yoda himself would die on impact, I personally would also suggest that Xanatos wouldn't waste any time writing messages on the wall. I also believe that after killing the Grandmaster, he would instantly flee the temple and give up on destroying it. But the damage he dealt would already be done, unleashing an echo that spread and surged across the galaxy, partially because he was the Grand Master, but mainly because we're taking implications from the death of Jedi Master Mika Giet. When Mika died, his death was felt across the galaxy, throughout the planet of Yenshor, all along the hyperspace lanes, and even Coruscant itself. Even Darth Sidious felt his death, grinning and gloating to his apprentice, Darth Maul. Following this same line of thought, the assassination of Master Yoda would erupt like a storm amongst the sacred halls of the Jedi Temple, attacked and slain inside the very place many of them deemed the safest. Before progressing any further from here, I have to better explain our precise date in the timeline, with Judy Watson herself never dating the Jedi Apprentice series, and its precise timeline was only given later on in the Essential Reader's Companion. The only other way to reach such a point would be to guess, something we could hypothetically do with the captive temple novelization and the suggestions given that Master Ki-Adi-Mundi was already a part of the council. But anyone who's actually read the material could already tell you that Ki-Adi-Mundi didn't join the council until after the death of Mika Giet. This could be explained away with the assumption that the captive temple takes place while Ki-Adi-Mundi was just filling in as a knight, since he did technically join the council as a Jedi Knight, something that in hindsight does hold some weight towards it if we remember that while Mika isn't mentioned in the Captive Temple novel, he is mentioned in the Evil Experiment novel later on in the Jedi Apprentice series. So Judy Watson obviously knew about him, and she knew that he existed. But if we hold on to the implications from the Essential Reader's Companion, the date of Yoda's death would fall during the year 44 BBY, meaning first of all, Jedi Master Mika Giet would still be alive, but also the position of Jedi Council Master Tavoka is left up to debate. Not just them, but the survival of Jedi Padawan Brook Chun would be our next change, having already fallen to the dark side, except now, with the sudden change of plans and the abrupt departure of Xanatos from the Jedi Temple, so too would Brook follow him. I should also point out that the identity of Xanatos as the attempted assassin wasn't revealed in George's timeline until after the failed strike on Yoda. But now, in our timeline, not only would it be successful, but he would also go on to flee before anyone could capture him. With so much needing to be addressed just from this point, Brook Chun would be our first focus, fully committing himself to his new master with his senior lightsaber already red and his devotion to the dark side as solid as concrete. There are two directions I could take this story, the first being Xanatos and Chun maintaining their independent position from both Sith and Jedi, while the second would be a direct correlation with the Dark Lord, Darth Sidious. However, I want to avoid the second option, mainly because the idea of Xanatos being the apprentice to Darth Sidious instead of Darth Maul could be its own story, but also because here in our timeline, Xanatos will declare himself beyond both. Much like how Revan was both a Dark Lord and a Jedi Master, Xanatos sought to be the same, whether he earned those titles fairly or through manipulation, no longer bound by the rules of those above him and living his life however he craved. Of course, this is all going off the assumption that Xanatos genuinely wanted to train Brook Chun in the first place, and not just trick him into stealing artifacts. And with the survival of Chun, this would also save Obi-Wan Kenobi from ever being scarred by his death. From here, the next Jedi Grandmaster must be named and addressed, someone hard to narrow down from such a distinguished host, with Mace Windu himself having recently earned the position, while Mika Giet, again, is still alive. We will also be progressing forward under the idea that since the exact date of Master Tavoka's death is never given, he too will be alive at this critical moment, meaning Master Plo Koon wouldn't be on the council because he only joined it after taking Tavoka's spot. Skipping past all of this, I think I speak for everyone when I say there's only 4 real options, disregarding Mace Windu because, again, he only just recently joined the Council in the first place. He would never, in my opinion, be chosen in this timeline. Instead, our choices are between Masters Tavoka, Yaddle, Apo Rancis, and Toon, with an honorable mention going to Yariel Poof. And if we use the process of elimination and remind ourselves that Apo Rancis was once the student of Master Yaddle, we can dismiss him in favor of her, leaving us now with only 3 remaining Jedi to choose between: Tavoka, Yaddle, and Toon, any of which could change the galaxy in their own way, something that none of the unnamed Jedi Council Masters shown in the General Grievous comics would ever possibly achieve. However, not only are these masters so irrelevant that they don't even have names, the idea of a Chiss Jedi Council Master deserves its own video. And in that same notion, while I personally want to give the position to Master Tavoka, that will be the subject of its own video whenever that day will be. The idea of Jedi Grandmaster Yaddle also deserves to be the subject of its own video, with her sacrifice on Mawan leaving a mental scar on Anakin Skywalker, before using the Force to absorb the pre-planned devastation that Granta Omega unleashed. She lost her own life. But in return, while the exact number is never given, implications from the novel would suggest that Yaddle's sacrifice saved thousands of lives, including Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. If Master Yaddle did not act in this moment, it's implied that the entire city of Natan would have been wiped off the planet's surface, or at the very least, so contaminated, irradiated, and polluted that none could survive there. Because of this, the selected host of our new Jedi Grand Master falls instead upon one remaining person, someone who, I will openly admit, is rather obscure, since he himself only appears in one singular novel. But that's perfectly fine, because it was written by the Star Wars goddess herself, Judy Watson, and I personally strive to include her work whenever I can. Judy Watson is, in my opinion, the most influential woman who's ever touched Star Wars, only comparable to Carol Crispin. Star Wars, as I know it, wouldn't exist without these 2 women. May Carol Crispin forever rest with the Force, and may Judy Watson forever hide behind her fake name. I will not speak her true name out of respect. And with all of this being addressed, Jedi Grandmaster Toon would, in our timeline, be unanimously voted into the position, with the Room of 1,000 Fountains still scarred from the cited impact of Master Yoda's past death. And the reason why Master Toon would be chosen is because of his age, being over several hundred years old during the novel, while most of the more important things about him are never answered. But this is honestly more of a blessing for us and the fanfiction community, as we can genuinely just say that he's the same race as Yaddle and Yoda, but I personally want to take a different approach and address the unnamed Jedi I previously mentioned, glossing over the fact that roughly half of the council seats are permanent, while the other half are rotating positions, and acknowledging that the unnamed Jedi shown in the General Grievous comics are just that, temporary, I still want to take inspiration from them and suggest that Jedi Master Tune was and will be, in our timeline, a Neti, the same race as Master Ode Benar and Tirasay. This would be one of the better explanations for his extreme age. And for those among us who want to outright dismiss Master Tune, to act like he doesn't matter or that he isn't relevant, that same argument could be used against half the Jedi Council, and twice as many Jedi, like Thame Cerillion or Valara Sar. Moving on from this, our next major change will be the inclusion and replacement of Master Tune all along the remaining Jedi Apprentice novels, all the way up until The Shattered Peace. Not because we're going to focus on Prince Lead, but because of the timeline. With the year still being 44 BBY, and with its end approaching swiftly, I want to address the Battle of Galadriel, a battle that single-handedly decided the future fate of Master Dooku and his second Padawan, Komari Vosa, with later material outright giving the battle the precise date of 44 BBY. Such an implication spits in the face of the Jango Fett open season comics, where it is physically stated in English on the panel 12 years before the Battle of Geonosis. Because the Battle of Galadriel takes place during the third edition of the open season comic, it obviously takes priority over conflicting material. And with that being said, Master Dooku would still be a part of the Jedi Order until this battle takes place. Progressing further ahead once more, skimming through and past the rest of the Jedi Apprentice, Brook Chun would grow not only into a more powerful Dark Jedi, but a loyal servant of the dark side and his master, Xanatos, all until the Day of Reckoning and the original suicide of Xanatos, something that in our timeline would end up being Brook Chun, tricked and left as an offering for Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi before he committed the same deed that his master originally did. Gifting Xanatos the chance to escape and hide out and away, I will admit that I've gone out of my way to completely ignore Granta Omega whenever I could. Partially because I think he is, in my opinion, not a good depiction, but mainly it's because I'm convinced that unless Xanatos has a child gifted with the Force, he shouldn't have a child at all. This, of course, is a debate over midichlorians and whether or not the powers of the Force are passed down through the family line, with Jedi during the Knights of the Old Republic having Jedi children who themselves would also go on to have their own Jedi children. The Clone Wars was littered with conflicting material, like Galen Merrick being Force sensitive, just as both of his parents, while none of Ki-Adi-Mundi's daughters ever became a Jedi. But we're going to be ignoring all of that, and we're going to assume that Granta Omega still exists, and he was still doing what he originally did, but he will not be the son of Xanatos. They are not related by blood in this timeline. From here, the depictions, appearances, and assignments originally given by Master Yoda during the Jedi Apprentice novels would in turn, in our timeline, be given by Grandmaster Tune, all the way until the very battle that we just previously talked about, Galadriel, and the question of what would happen next. Not in the sense of what would happen after, but in regard to if any of it would happen at all. Under Grandmaster Toon, would the Jedi still be sent to Galadriel? Would Dooku still leave the Order after Galadriel? Would Komari Vosa still fall to the dark side? Most of these concepts could, and rightfully should, be their own separate videos. However, we will be going off the assumption that the open season comics progress exactly the same as they originally did, with Komari Vosa going on to vanish from the Order after her implied fall to the dark side, while Master Dooku himself would disappear into exile. This allows us to finally bring our attention back to Xanatos and what he himself had been doing since his failed retreat from Telos 4, knowing then and there that his home planet would never be safe so long as the Jedi survived. He went on to conclude that the safest space to hide would be somewhere the Jedi never looked, any planet or parsec that called Hutt space its home, nearly the same place that Komari herself visited in the original timeline, or at the very least, somewhat close by. Of course, her own destination will be our next subject to change, since her entire fall to the dark side is glossed over in only one databook. We as fans of the lore will never have a clear answer to her fall. Did she genuinely fall in love with Dooku, or did the lust for power corrupt her? This, like many, and indeed most things in Star Wars, is solely left up to you and your own personal interpretation, leading us to our next change that must be expressed: the romance between Xanatos and Komari Vosa. Upon the first utterance of such a statement, one might assume that they never met before and would meet now on hostile terms. But this is something that I personally disagree with, because of past implications from the Dark Side comics. While Komari Vosa is never shown in the comics, the very first panel states clear as day that it takes place 53 years before the Battle of Yavin. So Komari Vosa herself and Master Dooku were still a part of the Order, just not shown in the comic. At least that's the suggestion, since again, much of Komari Vosa's past is sadly skipped over super quickly and then forgotten about during either the Dead Age or the Reboot Age. Something that won't happen now in our timeline, as Komari Vosa and Xanatos held their reunion upon a planet neither of them had ever heard of. Arriving on Tatooine, with the former seeking to earn credits under Hutt bounties, while the other felt pulled by the Force itself, neither of them knew that the other had fallen until both lunged to kill their suspected Jedi foe. And let's just say that after this brief battle, after both confessed the love and emotions they held in check amongst their hours together inside the Jedi Temple, their leaping strikes turned to prolonged embrace and cradled confession as a sandstorm swept over their duel outside Mos Eisley's spaceport, only pressed back once their powers in the Force were merged and their lips pressed together.